All right, everybody, welcome to the Drone Responders conversation with the FAA. With the FAA's Mike O'Shea. He's our facilitator. We'll have a nice presentation. We'll give it about a minute for people to get in the room, and then we'll get started.
So how hot is it in Dallas today, Chris?
Actually, I think it's under 100 today.
We're at 93 with about 78% humidity.
Wow, fancy screen.
That is new. Ooh, You should add like between two ferns after that.
All right, to keep us on time, we'll get started now. Thank everybody for joining. Again, this is Drone Responders, a conversation with the FAA on public safety UAS. And we have Mike O'Shea. My name is Charles Werner with Drone Responders, the director, and I welcome all of you here. And I'll just turn it over to Mike.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Mike O'Shea. I'm the Public Safety Liaison with the Federal Aviation Administration's Unmanned Aircraft Systems Integration Office, which is a nice short title. But I just want to welcome everybody to this webinar. We mentioned before that we've had lots of questions about beyond visual line of sight, obstruction shielding. It's sort of a new way to fly beyond visual line of sight with a 107 waiver. We answered some of your questions regarding that, but we wanted to bring the expert on board. I sat on the safety risk management panel that was actually run by Chris Purdy. Chris probably knows more about beyond visual line of sight obstruction shielding than anybody at the FAA. He's also the person who signs up, reviews and signs off on the waivers for beyond visual line of sight obstruction shielding. So he is the right person to present to you obstruction shielding and what we are looking for at the FAA in a successful waiver application. Let me turn it over to Chris. Go ahead, Chris. It's all yours.
All right. Good afternoon. As he said, my name is Chris Dory. I'm part of the 107 waiver team. And we did come up with the obstruction shielding waiver after taking a lot of input from the industry and looking at some of the operations that the first responders had been doing. And well, I'll just get started. Let me just, I'll just share a PowerPoint presentation and kind of go over some of the basics and the basic concept of it and talk about some options, and then we can take some questions. Get this to work correctly.
There we go.
This is basically some, I'll move my display here so I can actually look at my slides. So this is basically some background. We wanted to provide some type of beyond visual line of sight that did away with observers. We had a lot of industry was very interested in this and worked with us on trying to come up with policy. We've had some experience with, like I said, with the fire, the police, and emergency management had already done something very similar with their what they call tactical BVLOS. So that kind of provided us some data for that. So thank you guys for doing that. That actually kind of paved the way a little bit more for us to justify what we were going to do. We did hold an SRM panel with a variety of people and talk about some of the risks associated with doing this type of operation and to see if we could determine if it was at a low enough risk where we could start issuing waivers for them and put together some type of policy. So this is what we came up with. It's a basic set of guidelines. Is that in the beginning we started with the operation must remain within 50 feet laterally from a man-made or natural obstruction, and that was because that was kind of more of a common sense line, because we figured, hey, if we've got an aircraft that's operating within 50 feet of a power line or 50 feet of a building, there's a lot more going on there than just him getting a drone. He's got other problems, or we've got other violations that are going on because they're not supposed to be there. We limited it to a maximum hard ceiling of 400 feet above the ground level. Now that is in most cases for the 50 foot. We have made exceptions for other things, like if, and we'll get into it with some of the slides that I have available, so you can see what we're talking about there. But we try to limit the basic to 400 feet above the ground level. You gotta have a Part 107 certificate, and you have to understand that Part 89 still applies. So the remote ID, when it comes to play in September, that's going to be applicable. And then all the other Part 107 regulations apply to the operation as well. We didn't change any Part 91 regulations, so all those regulations still apply for crewed aircraft. So you're still going to have aircraft like prop dusters and HIMS helicopters operating and altitudes below 500 feet. Personally, I'd like to see that change, but I just don't see that happening anytime soon. The flight operations are limited at daytime and VNC. This was kind of done for a mitigation to kind of lower some of the risk, to allow anybody that's operating in those at that altitude, give them the opportunity to actually see the drone when it's flying. We still want you to file a NOTAM. In some cases, we've actually done away with filing a NOTAM in some instances, and there have been some cases where we can justify that a NOTAM is just kind of it's a kind of an overkill and a burden to the operator. So, but as a standard, we still required to file a NOTAM for the operation. Flight operation must have and utilize ADS-BN. One of the mitigations that we are using is that you got to have an ADS-BN to assist that. Now, a lot of the drone systems like BGI has an ADS-BN receiver. We do have operators that have dedicated ADS-BN receivers. We're not looking at using a cell phone or anything that's coming off the internet, because the latency between the readout on the aircraft reaching the internet or the availability of the internet where you're operating does not always apply. So we want to keep that ADS-BN to be as a true receiver in some form or fashion. The visual observer is not required. That was the whole point of doing the shielded waiver. But we don't, if you're going to use a visual observer, we're not going to say no to the shielded waiver. I mean, anything to enhance safety as a mitigation is always a plus, but you're not going to be penalized for VO. Must be Class G airspace. Of course, all of our Part 107 waivers that we write have to be Class G airspace, and if you operate in any place other than Class G, you have to get the appropriate airspace authorizations. So this is our what we consider our basic beyond visual line of sight obstruction shielded waiver for your operation. So you've got the 400 foot AGL hard ceiling. You're to remain 50 feet within above ground level or within obstruction or man-made item, whether it actually could be trees, could be a building, could be power lines, as long as you're within 50 feet of some type of an obstruction. Class G, as we said, and ADS-BN, and operation during VMC. So this is the basic waiver for which we start. Now, in the beginning, just as a little history, we started here at 50 feet, and not all of these scenarios where people operating are going to be useful. There's some drones that have to operate further out than 100, have to operate at 100 feet or 200 feet or different particular operations. But the 50 foot is where we start, and the management has allowed us the waiver team to expand that 50 foot further out, depending on additional detect and avoid technology that is available. So we've got some with visual, we've got some with acoustic, we've got some with radar, and those are expanded out, and as you'll see shortly. Now the public, what we call the public safety beyond visual line of sight obstruction shielded waiver. If you were to apply for this today, this is kind of what you would get. You'd still be limited to the 400-foot ceiling. You'd still be 50-foot Class D airspace. You still have to have the ADS-B in receiver. And but we're allowing you to operate in a day-night operation, so you can operate at night, but you have to have anti-collision lights on the aircraft. That's the big change for that. So we do make, unlike other areas for the Part 107 waivers, this is our an allowance to our law enforcement and our first responders to use this in the day-night operation. Just so you know what else is available and what we're doing. We show here 50 foot can be extended up to 200 feet using additional radar, DAA, visual DAA, or an acoustic DAA system, in case you might have it. I know some of the first responders in like California and some down in Houston are using a visual DAA system, and we've allowed them to operate, I'm assuming, into a little bit higher altitude. And just so you know, just kind of give you an idea of what some other things that we have. We're looking at entertaining a nighttime beyond visual line of sight operation. And we may allow that up to 200 feet with lights visible 3 statute miles, provided that they can be seen with night vision equipment in that light spectrum. We have not issued any of these yet. We're talking about them and discussing the further mitigations that we might have to incorporate in the waiver in the event we do that. So it's going to depend, and the reason that we're allowing that at nighttime is because the crop duster is not going to be operating at night. Obviously, and the HEMS operators, when they're operating at night, they're going to be in their night vision goggles. So there's a lot of thought that the operation will be much safer at night doing a shielded operation up to 200 feet than during the daytime. So we're looking at that, but as I said, we have not issued any of these waivers yet. We're still working. We're still working on the one test case to see if we can get it done and if we can get the appropriate risk level down.
Hey, Chris.
Yes.
I just wanted to ask, you're familiar with the tactical BVLOS waiver. If a public safety agency filed a waiver along the lines of the TBVLOS waiver, limiting it to 1,500 feet and 50 feet above, would that be something that could be approved in that form? So it's very similar to the tactical waiver for the Part 107 people?
We're using that as a model to build what we have. So the tactical BVLOS waiver is kind of where we started, and we want to expand on that to allow it to grow a little bit further. I don't know. I'm always open to the different variations of the shielded waiver or the tactical BVLOS waiver. If you want to refer it to that, and we said we'd like a 107 waiver beyond visual line of sight. This is kind of how we want to structure it. Now, it's not going to be one of those things that it happens overnight, but we can discuss it and determine what would be feasible. And if it would be feasible to see if we would have to do a specific risk management panel on it to see what the risks are. So I've never been close to changing things up and progressing them further, So that's kind of how I look at it. It's kind of how a lot of this is going on. We just kind of taken things and said, well, that sounds like a good idea or common sense. So let's try to build something around this idea and see if we can make it safe. And the management has allowed us to take a little bit more risk than we traditionally have taken in the past. So we're always open to new things. Just for your information, in case you guys ever get called out on something that you don't know what's happening, we've allowed we've determined and made our own definition of what critical infrastructure is. And so we've allowed beyond this line of sight over critical infrastructure with a ceiling of 200 feet above the item. So like over a nuclear power plant, what's issued here, we're allowing a drone to go 200 feet above. Now, the manned aircraft are not supposed to be within 500 feet of that. And I don't know of any aircraft that would fly directly over a steam vent for a nuclear power plant. But the point being is that if they're 200 feet above a critical infrastructure, they're not supposed to be there to begin with. I know in the state of Texas, if they're within 500 feet, then they get penalized by the state of Texas, not only by them, then they probably get penalized by the FAA as well. So that's day and night. We have operations going on there because of the controlled access area, and some of those are protected by TFRs. So there's the controlled access area, so they're not flying over people, and they're contained within the geofence, so they're not going to go outside the planned operational area. And a lot of these are done for security events and also for inspections. And then we have an experimental one that we have out now. We've only got one. I think we've got maybe two of these out right now. Yeah, I think it's two. But we have two of these waivers out as an experiment where we're saying they can be 50 feet above the highest obstacle within half mile of their operation. And to give you an example, I like to use is the first one that we issued out was for the Tesla facility down in Austin, Texas, which is surrounded by these large high tension power lines. And the drone is operating within those high tension power lines, 50 feet above the highest obstacle there. And the thought process behind that is that no aircraft is going to be flying down the highway, dive inside these power lines and fly for a half a mile and then pop up on the other side and fly over the power lines and then fly away. The thought process is there's not going to be a manned aircraft there, so the risk would be low. And if some guy's doing that, then he's probably operating unsafely to begin with, and we've got bigger issues at play. So as I said, the operations will be reviewed on a case-by-case basis for waivers and exemptions and may require additional input and additional safety mitigations. We understand that sometimes it's time sensitive, and a lot of times when there's time sensitive, I send you over to Michael Shea, which what is it, Gary Fleming, they work the SGIs, and so that's probably the best bet for time sensitive applications. You can apply through it at a drone zone, and I'm going to lay some knowledge on you now on why you guys are getting your waivers disapproved when you apply for it. So when you apply for a waiver, it's very important that you include a detailed concept of operations. And that tells me exactly what you're going to do from point A to point B. Then on the FAA's website, and Michael O'Shea can send out a link to it, but there's what we call the waiver safety explanation guidelines, the WASEGs, as we call them. It's a series of questions that you have to answer and discuss with us on how you're meeting all of these particular mitigations, such as how are you going to make your aircraft visible at 1 or 3 statute miles, whether it's during the daylight or 3 statute miles at night, as per the regulation. How are you going? What training are you going to provide your people? What about the weather you're operating about? What is how are you going to know exactly where the drone is at all times? What happens during the malfunctions? These are basic questions that you have to answer for every application. So every application that comes through Drone Zone has to answer these basic questions. And if they don't answer them, then they get basically disapproved. We get a lot of applications from drone first responders that are basically, I'm such and such with the volunteer fire department, and I would like a waiver to fly at night with my drone to look at a burning building. And that's all it will say. Sometimes it talks about the operation of the police department. Sometimes it talks about special operations with fire department, but they never answer the required questions that I'm supposed to look at and judge for every single application, whether it's for a package delivery, or it's for a first responder, or it's for some guy that wants to fly a photography mission. These questions are important. I have a requirement to look at every one of those questions and answer them in my database. If you get half of them right, you get a letter from me requesting more information. If you get more than half of them wrong, or you don't answer them, and I can't find the answer, then you'll get a disapproval letter. We get a lot of applications that don't even answer those questions at all. But if you make an effort to answer the question and it's wrong, I won't say wrong, or we don't understand what you're putting down, chances are you'll get an RFI and we'll ask you, hey, can you clarify this? And sometimes even I will send out a question or letter to applicants, and I get the answer back, and I don't even understand what they answered. I have to look at my question. Did I send that out right? Could I make it more clear? And sometimes I've sent additional requests for information out, asking to clarify or giving them a clearer question to answer. And a lot of times the light will come on and I'll get an appropriate answer. But I can't stress enough that you've got to answer the WASEG questions. Otherwise, you're not going to get you're going to get a disapproval from me. And then during that disapproval process, after I write your disapproval, I take your name and all your contact information. I send it right over to Mike O'Shea, and I say, Mike, you need to contact these guys, and you need to, find out exactly what they are. And sometimes I even have questions on whether you're an authentic drone first responder team. I'll have a private individual apply for a waiver for a fire department. And so who do I issue it to? Do I issue it to the private individual, or do I issue it to the fire department? So there's a question when I look at the email, it's a Gmail address. And so I'm left with this question. Is this a guy who just wants to play with the fire department, or is it actually somebody in the fire department? So we need to be very clear on the issuance on that as well.
And Chris, do we have access to the questions that we might be able to provide to public safety in advance to say, these are questions you're going to be asked, rather than to go through the application process first and maybe help provide some guidelines to them about what they need to be able to answer. For example, it sounds to me like you want to know what the CONOPS are as far as the air operations. You want to know when you take off for a flight, it's going to be for this type of mission, and I'm going to fly this way, and you're going to count for flying over people, all those kind of things, so that you know before you provide the approval that they've addressed all the issues as far as both air safety and ground safety that you're concerned about.
Yes, all those questions are available on the FAA website. We put a brand new document up that clarifies a lot of the questions that we were having. We've gotten feedback, and so we cleared that up. And like I said, Mike provided a link to that specific PDF document, and they can take that document and answer the questions directly from that document.
So we'll push that out to try to help on your end, so that people are familiar before they jump into the process, and then they just fill something out and send it through, because then it's obviously going to come back, especially if you haven't done it. Now, Mike, let me switch to you for a second. One, the question was, if you apply and they say fire department and they say individual, I'm trying to figure that one out. What does that look like to you?
So the issue is we've had people apply on behalf of a fire department that we don't know if they're actually affiliated with that fire department. We don't know if it's a vendor or the fire department. And so when I followed up with those people, some people were like, no, I'm just a citizen in the community hoping I can help the fire department. And I was like, no, dude, no. But so that's I think that's what Chris was trying to get at. So we need to make sure whoever the applying party is, we know who they are and how they're connected with that public safety agency.
Okay, thanks.
That's all I have. That's my beyond visual line of sight shielded brief. It's very short, sweet, to the point. It's made to be simple, a simple operation and a simple waiver to issue. So,
And can we get the PowerPoint presentation to share with public safety as well?
yeah. Mike, did I send that to you?
If you didn't send it to me, and I'll send it to Charles either way, or you can go direct with him. So Chris, a couple questions about this is, you talked about for public safety, you're going to allow night operations, which is great. I know there were some discussions, and I don't know where it went, with allowing them to operate in controlled airspace as long as they got a LANCE authorization or a further authorization. That would not be granted through this beyond visual line of sight obstruction shielding waiver. But if they got an independent waiver or allowance to fly in controlled airspace, would they be able to use this in controlled airspace?
Yes, they first need the waiver first, and then they have to apply for the appropriate airspace authorization.
And I think it's important to everybody to realize that's listening is that your beyond visual line of sight obstruction shielding will not grant you the authority to fly in controlled airspace. It just grants you the authority to fly in Class G. To fly in controlled airspace, you're going to need further authorities like a LANCE authorization or something to that extent. So that we wanted to make that sure that was very clear with everybody.
Let me blur it a little more. So we're seeing people that have COAs that are getting custom grids at airports to allow for more leniency of aircraft. Will that play into this at all?
Now, that's a public aircraft authorization. That's not a Part 107. So
just want to make
those
it
are
clear
two
so people
different
know.
things. And I know it's confusing to people that we have two different things. And there's a reason why 107 is for the masses. Public aircraft is for government only. If you choose to fly with the masses, then you follow the rules with the masses. And that's a simple way of saying it. The other thing is, I know a couple issues we've had with people is getting a beyond visual line of sight obstruction shielding waiver does not alleviate you from the 107, 37, I think it is, what flights over people, 29. Sorry, I'm brain dead. I've been on vacation for 2 weeks. But so you have to mitigate how you're going to handle that. So if you're operating in a rural area and you're like, flying over cow pastures, it's going to be pretty easy. But if you're operating in an urban area, you have to basically tell us how you're going to mitigate the risk of operating a drone that is not certified to fly over people, to fly over people. So, and it can be, that, hey, we're going to, cordon off an area, or we have a defined incident perimeter. We're flying over the woods looking for a lost child. And then some of these things, I've already had people argue with me, but saying we need this now because it's an emergency. And it's like, and just like Chris told you, if it's an emergency, then you contact the Systems Operations Support Center, you get a special governmental interest, or SGI, which is essentially that emergency flight authorization. And they issue those things in minutes. And just like he said, you call Kerry Fleming's folks, and they're really, really good at working public safety to get that. So if you're thinking you're going to submit this to operate tomorrow because of an emergency, it's not happening. So just to let you know that we still have the SOSC there to handle those kind of in-between operations until you get the authorizations you need to conduct whatever you need to do.
Yeah, and just to be clear, Mike, the questions, the WASA questions does contain questions about operating over people and moving vehicles. That's part of the question that they have.
Yeah, and really, and I like what Charles is asking, is basically he's saying, hey, can we take this form and sort of develop a template, that makes it easier for them to review and approve. And nobody at the FAA is going to say no to that. If you make our job easier, then that makes us happier. And happy people sign off on waiver applications. I don't know that. No studies have been done, and no animals were harmed in the making of this film. No, so I think it's a really good idea. The other thing you said, Charles, and I thought had a lot of interest to me is taking sort of the tactical beyond visual line of sight, maybe expanding it out to a mile, and then sort of developing a ConOps around obstruction shielding based off of that. And I think that might be something that, because part of the issue is the farther you go out, the more you have to mitigate for flights over people, and to make sure you're not going to hit something else, and have better control and comms, and and all the other stuff you need to operate that aircraft at further distances. But if you could pick saying, we know that 99.99% of our missions, we only need to go out a mile at the most, or whatever. I don't know what the distance is. Then maybe we can sit down and take a look and say, okay, we can put that into sort of a category that makes it easy to review and approve, based on, we know what you're doing specifically.
Yeah, I think that's what I was trying to get at. I think you picked up on what I was trying to say, is that we've been already talking about under the BVLOS waiver that we'd like to see it extended a little bit further, but this may be a way to do that without actually having to go in and change the BVLOS waiver. We can fly under Part 107 and be able to achieve a little bit more distance, as long as we're addressing all the issues that Chris is worried about.
And also he talked about it, you have to meet Part 89, which is the remote ID. So it's important that you realize that we've already had people saying, well, I'm going to use obstruction shielding, then apply for, a waiver to not squawk my remote ID. And it's like, no, those things are not symbiotic with each other yet. So you'll have to wait on that, but you'll have to squawk remote ID in order to fly beyond visual line of sight with obstruction shielding. The other thing that flights over people, we have the ops over people rule that we're looking to certify drones that they'll be able to fly over people, whether that's a drone that's less than 0.55 pounds, that allow flights over people now, and beyond visual line of sight over people with remote ID. That could be a mitigation of flights over people, or if they meet the category 2 or 3 of that rule, that could be a mitigation for flights over people. Or if we ever get aircraft certified under category 4, that would meet the mitigation for flights over people too. So, it's all supposed to one day magically merge together to make it easier for you to operate, but everything's working at different speeds, and we're proving stuff before the technology has been developed and pushed to the field. And so I hate to say it, but sometimes we got to wait for everything to get done. But and part of the reason is also because nobody wanted to develop technologies until the FAA finally decided what they would actually accept, for category 2, category 3, category 4. And now that we're starting to see manufacturers take their aircrafts through the process to get them certified. So go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that thanks to Jim Blanchard, he gave the link to the guidelines for the Part 107s for those questions. So that's there. We'll work on creating a template that actually gets people closer to the answers that Chris is looking for so that they know what they've got to spell out in their operation.
Also, just another thing I want to point out while we're all here together is on one of the public safety forums, I saw that there were some questions about, does somebody have to have a 107 to do training with the drone on their police department? If it's just training and the drone weighs less than 0.55 pounds, the argument was that the training wasn't work, it was more recreational. And the answer is simple as anything time you do something for your agency, that is not considered recreational. You're getting paid or you're volunteering to do it for a mission or whatever, but it's not part of just going out and fun and flying, with your kids or whatever, then you need to have a Part 107 to conduct that operation. However, you can also train people by having a 107 operator standing right next to them that can grab the controls at any time and take over, if they do something like, hey, hold my rear and watch this. So that's allowed. So, and you can train that way too. So as long as someone's there available to grab the controls that has a 107, you can train them that way. But so there is a little bit of nuance there. But the basic thing is anything you do for your agency in public safety, it is not a recreational operation. Even if the drone's 0.55 pounds.
So can you also hit on, you referenced that it also must be assisted by ADS-B or radar. Can you talk about how people can do that don't know?
So for ADS-B, a lot of the drones now have that. And if you have a DJI product that's modern, it has ADS-B that's current. There are several small radar systems that are available. Echodyne makes one I know that we looked at that's about the size of a cell phone. That gives you a pretty good range, not humongous range because it's at a low level. And then the visual, like Chris was referring to, what you've seen with Pearland, Texas, has their visual system that's on top of a water tower that can look out a couple miles and identify targets, and that's giving you that visual acuity too to see and conduct that operation.
Okay, let's see. We have a question here. Let's see. Speaking of flights over people, did somebody answer that already?
Just did. More than likely that operation was illegal because we typically don't issue a waiver for something like that. We do have some that are out there, but for Nevada, I think a Nevada is a first-person view DJI product. I'm pretty sure that we haven't issued any waivers for that one.
And the reason why is not that we don't trust you guys. We don't trust this. This is not a certified product. This is not certified by the FAA. This is a consumer drone that's made by, in China by whoever. And it's not a certified product. We don't know what, if we know that it flies, great, because I own one, I own a couple. But it's not a certified product. So and if you've flown a drone on any length of time, it's not the drone is not going to fall out of the sky. It's when it's going to fall out of the sky. If you haven't dropped a drone out of the sky, then you haven't been flying drones for a while.
Yeah, because it isn't a matter of if, it's when.
Right. So and when that happens, we would rather not be over people.
Yeah, and so you've got one question here says, my agency currently has a COA with BVLOS approved waiver. When our agency applies for a SO BVLOS waiver, will that simply be added to our COA? I see Chris is typing an answer, and my guess is his answer is no. That is a public aircraft operation. COAs and public aircraft operations are totally separate from Part 107, which we discussed a moment ago.
So Chris can tell you that, go ahead, Chris.
I said Part 107 waivers are separate. They stand on them. They stand by themselves.
And he's actually disapproved a couple of requests because people said they were going to use their beyond visual line of sight obstruction shielding as part of their COA operation.
No,
which
not going to work.
Can't happen because they're two different things. One is a governmental operation, one is for the masses. 107. So you can't say that's going to be part of your COA because it's not. So once you tell us that, and we know you don't have a good understanding of what you're trying to do, and the answer is going to be no, you're not going to do it.
Okay. I think that's all the questions that I see in here. Does anybody else have any other questions before we wrap up? Questions on anything for that matter? It can be, do you have any questions on remote ID? Do you have any more questions for Chris? Yeah, I think that, one of the things we saw the obstructed shielding waiver that was going to benefit was it was going to give similar capability to Part 107 to match up with the BVLOS waiver to some degree. And it may extend it more.
The only difference, there are advantages to the obstruction shielding because you can go greater distance than 1,500 feet. The disadvantage is under a COA, since you're self-certifying the aircraft for operation, you're saying it's safe to operate over people. We allow you, in case of emergency, to fly that aircraft over people, where we don't allow that under 107. So that's the difference between tactical beyond visual line of sight and obstruction shielding. Obstruction shielding, like I said, if you got the equipment that can support you going 10,000 miles, exaggeration. But if you got equipment that can support you going, a couple miles out, then we're going to allow you to go a couple miles out if you can show us that you can operate that aircraft safely that distance and keep in communications with it.
One Part 107 waiver is we've encouraged all the drone first responders to get Part 107 waivers because it just adds to, it's just another piece of the puzzle that allows you to operate in particular areas. So you may not need something that is immediate, but an SGI might not be appropriate to get at that time. So you could switch over to the Part 107 and operate under the Part 107 mode. So it's kind of like it's kind of like giving you multiple options for your operation.
And that's what we
like
recommend.
The use of force continuum in law enforcement, but this is the use of drone continuum. So you want to have you have different tools on your gun belt or different tools on the fire truck that you pull out for different things, and we're doing the same thing for you is trying to find different things you can use in different situations that'll help you achieve your mission. And like I said, the bottom line is I always like we sound like naysayers, like no. But you're talking to people whose job is airspace safety, so we're very cautious. So, but when you need to fly because bad things are happening, and that's why we have the Systems Operations Support Center that is designed to quickly evaluate what you need to do and make it happen. And all we do is we're the slow people. We're the people who help you with the processes and stuff. But if you need to fly in an hour, then that's we have in place to make that happen, or in minutes actually. But so,
which is why we recommend that all public safety agencies get both Part 107 and COAs, because then you've got the best of both worlds. That you have different circumstances, you can use each one of them when needed, and again, in addition just to COAs and public aircraft operations, the Part 107 does give you some liability, and it also kind of gives some insurance that you have some knowledge of national airspace. Whereas we know that self-certification is available under a COA where you don't have to go Part 107, but we really don't recommend that at all.
So, and I will tell you that typically when we talk to people who, say, well, we're just going to self-certify our folks under a COA, I don't think they realize what that means. That means you have to have a training program in place that's equal or better than a 107 training program. You have to maintain the records on that. You have to show us that you're maintaining them. If we ask, and you also have to show us that you're keep updating and training your folks. And sometimes we tell people, in most cases, it's easier for you just to have your folks do 107 and do the reoccurring training every 2 years from the FAA. However, having said that, I've had some departments send me their documented training that they do for their public safety officers. And it's really amazing. I mean, it's really good stuff. And I'm like, that not only exceeds 107, it exceeds probably anything I know it's out there, because I've seen people, you well know that under 107, the FAA does not require you to show proficiency of actually flying a drone. In fact, you've never even had to have touched a drone in order to get a Part 107. But so some of the programs we've seen people develop, that they have a lot of flying proficiency as part of that. And perfectly honest, I really like that. I like to see people that they practice flying their drones, and that's part of their initial training too.
And I think that's the next big standard issue we have to do of doing the basic certification of proficiency, similar we see in qualifications for firefighters and police officers that are operators of apparatus or specialty vehicles. So I think that's the next big thing we need to work on. I know we've had conversations with MITRE, and we're talking with a bunch of other people that are doing training to work on those kind of things.
And we've looked at some of those programs, and obviously we have not endorsed any of them because that's not what the rule says. Everything from the Department of Commerce, the NIST training in the buckets, to other programs we've seen, and they're all good. The thing that you need to remember is whatever you do, it should sort of match the missions you fly, and also should it give you good practice with hand-eye coordination of the controller and the drone, so that you're comfortable. When you take off that drone, you know where it's at, what it's doing, what its attitude is, so that you can continue to control it. And I don't know how you guys operate drones, but I always operate the drone going away from me, so that no matter what happens, I know if I push forward on the stick, it's going away from me. If I pull back, it's coming back towards me. And that's just how I keep the attitude correct for me. And then everybody has their own way of doing it. Mine obviously is the right way, because whatever the way is best for you guys is the right way. But it's important that you keep that proficiency. And like anything, that's new in public safety, we're really excited when we first get these things, and we'll fly the heck out of them. And then after a while, they'll start sitting in a Pelican box in the back of a patrol car truck, or in a cabinet on the fire truck. But it's important that you force yourself to spend some time, practicing, getting proficient with the drone. Even when you think, it's hot out, it's rainy out, or whatever. But it's important that when you actually have to fly that mission, that you're ready to fly it, that you're not still going, hey, do I push forward, backwards?
Yeah, I think that's still part of the standards we need to develop, the requirements. It's just like with our other certifications. We have certain continuing education hours we need to have to maintain. And really, when you're talking about drones, we're talking about perishable skills. If you don't keep doing that manipulation, the hand-eye coordination, you're not going to be good at it when you need it. So we need to have some standards that define some requirements, either actual flying or even combination with some simulation that's acceptable. So with that, I don't see any more questions. Chris, thanks for coming on. It's been very helpful to share. At the end of the day, your success is our success. So when we provide more information to the people that are applying for these waivers, then it makes it easier and quicker on your end.
Yeah.
I want to thank Chris too, because
when I get the right submission.
Chris is an awesome resource for waivers and how they work. And it's been a great team player working with him. Like he said, when he gets ones that are like, just don't kind of quite get it, he sends them over the fence to me to sort of talk with them and help people walk through the process. So we're able to help agencies that way. So we're trying not to say no to public safety. We're trying to help you get to that, approval process or across the finish line, or whatever analogy you would like to use. But Chris has been a really great partner in that. So thanks, Chris.
Yeah, one last question. How long is a waiver for once you apply for it?
And we're writing them for 4 years.
Wow, I'd heard 2 years before. 4 years, that's great.
I like that too.
All right, well, listen,
5 years?
Wait a minute, I see 3 questions here that have popped up.
Did you say 6 years? Did you say 7 years, sir?
Did he say 8 years? You can, if you got any questions you want to send, you can send it to me at charles@droneresponders.org, just to keep it easy, and I'll get the answers for you. And I think that's all the questions. Some thank yous in there. Got a thank you to Chris for approving his pending waiver in his inbox, LOL. So, all right, thanks everybody for attending, and we'll see you next month, the second Wednesday, 4 p.m. Eastern time. Thanks again, Chris. Thanks, Mike.